Flagg, and this is, I think I found a similar sort of thing when we talked about Victor Wembanyama back in that draft. It's like, I'm not really sure what you say when you're talking about a guy like this. It's like, okay, Cooper Flagg is going to be the number 1 overall pick. Cooper Flagg had some questions, I guess, coming into college about what about his offense and what about his shooting, and he shot very well on his threes. He hit his free throws. He's an elite level defensive prospect. I'll ask you this question though. To me, I don't like player comps are not player comps. It's not about this guy's going to have this career. It's about like what is the sort of style of player. And to me, that the idea of Cooper Flagg and the sort of stuff that he can potentially bring is we're talking about like a Kevin Garnett level of player defensively with more shooting, which KG would have done had he been around in this sort of an era. But is the ceiling for him, for Cooper Flagg, is it as a better offensive player or as a better defensive player?
Probably. Oh man, that's a good question. I really do think it can be on offense. I mean, maybe that's just because of the value of individual offense versus individual defense. Like Garnett, like you said, or like stylistically, I've even like compared him a lot to a guy like Jason Tatum, who maybe like isn't the high volume, high efficiency scorer, but like his incredible versatility and defense and passing and handling and shooting and all that, like makes him a guy who's making first team All NBA every year. And I think Cooper is that kind of player who, like you said, a lot of questions about, I don't know about a lot of questions. There were some questions about, his offense, what can he do? And then he averages like an efficient 22 points, shooting 38% from 3 on high usage. And it's like, oh yeah, this guy's actually a really damn good offensive player who improved a lot throughout the season. I think he's definitely more like strength based than a guy like Tatum, right? Where obviously he's gonna add a ton of strength as he grows and as he gets better. But he's just like a crazy worker, competitor with special athleticism. He's one of the very best passers in the draft as well, which is kind of under-discussed. Like, I feel like Flagg, like you said with Wemby, right? Like someone I haven't thought about in a minute just because there isn't so much to think about. Whereas, we're with all these other prospects, like debating where they rank on a board, or their floor or ceiling, or, their best fits. Whereas with Cooper, it's like, we already did. I did this a year ago, and he kind of is everything that we thought and more. So I think Flagg, while he's like his realistic ceiling probably on defense is higher, just because like I think it's very conceivable that he ends up being like an all defense first guy year over year with the way that he can protect the rim and defend the ball and rotate off the ball. But yeah, I mean, if he can really continue tightening his handle, become an elite pull-up shot maker, which he's shown the flashes to do, and he's going to be so good like without the ball. He's a great cutter, rebounder, screener, off-ball shooter, and driver. Like, there just isn't a lot that Cooper Flagg can't do.
The next part of that is that, okay, and I know the answer to this, but I think that it will be a question that maybe gets asked by some people, is that we saw a number 1 pick out of Duke in 2019 in Zion Williamson, who posted insane block and steal numbers coming out of college. And to say that Zion's defense has maybe not been at an elite level in the NBA would be a fair way of putting it. Flagg averaged 1.7 steals, 1.6 blocks per 36 minutes, which are not as good as Zion's numbers defensively. But when we talk about those numbers, and we've seen a lot of these sort of players who put up big defensive numbers in college and then can struggle coming into the NBA. And the names that always come to mind to me always seem to be Duke players, which is interesting because Kyle Filipowski put up these huge block numbers last season and then blocked 1 shot total in the NBA last season. And I don't know.
He really only blocked 1 shot last year?
He didn't, but he averaged like, I'm gonna look it up when
I was going to say, I believe you for a second.
He didn't block any shots. I'll look it up. But like all these Duke guys would put up these big defensive numbers and then that didn't work in the NBA. There's no fear of that with Flagg, is there? He's not like hey, I've put up defensive numbers because I'm just more athletic than everybody in college. I'm putting up defensive numbers because I'm an elite defender.
Zion was, even a player who I think has hit like his 0th percentile defensive outcome, where because of the conditioning and some of the motor stuff, right? Like he just never, became the defender. But Zion, even at Duke when he was great, was always so much more boom bust than Flagg, right? He was flying around, making incredible plays, blocking corner threes, but Flagg has like the play-to-play consistency that Zion just didn't, where Flagg is still making these highlight blocks and steals and, shutting guys down on the ball, but he's consistently rotating and help every possession. He's always in the right spot on defense. So he can gamble sometimes, and sometimes he'll like zone out, but every freshman does that. And Flagg does it far less often than most high caliber freshmen, especially ones that had his kind of offensive responsibility. Like he was the primary offensive guy for that team and their, most important defensive weapon. And I think that's really important and kind of undervalued, and like how much like mental load he had to kind of harbor as like, you're the main guy on offense and defense. And that's like not something a lot of NBA players have to do, right? And Flagg was able to do that in college. And yeah, I mean, even though the block and steal numbers like aren't, they're great for Flagg, but they aren't like all-time great. I think those kind of numbers to me are more just like indicators of like, athletic tools and instincts rather than like actual defensive ability, where, I mean, you throw on any tape of Flagg this year and you'll see him wrecking plays where he doesn't even get a box score stat.
Yeah, and that's the difference, is because there could be players in college who generate gigantic steal numbers through athleticism alone, but they get to the NBA and that they're good players, but they don't do anything like
I think
that.
of a guy like Thibault, who like the biggest boom bust defender of all time, right? Like historic steal numbers, had some really great seasons in the NBA on defense, but also had some really bad seasons in the NBA on defense just because of the play style. And Flagg is not like that.
The other one of those guys who had gigantic defensive numbers in college, but that didn't really happen that way in the NBA, is Ryan Dunn, who like put up these huge block and steal numbers and then barely blocked a shot. By the way, got Filipowski's block numbers. He had 15 total blocks, but but he had 8 of those 15 in the final 6 games of the season. So prior to that, he had 7 blocks. If you weren't paying attention to Jazz April basketball, he'd had 7 blocks in the previous.
Yeah, I can't
games.
say I was, but yeah, Filipowski, that's crazy. That's wild. I can't. But point being, Flagg's not going to be like that.
I don't think we need to talk that much about Cooper Flagg. In terms of from a fantasy point of view, I think that there's a real shot that he could be a top 50 guy like immediately, and then he'll consistently be a top 10 guy after that. I'm very, very confident, much like I was with Wembanyama, about what this guy is going to be from a production standpoint.
Stat sheet stuffer, efficient, does everything well. Like,
all right, so look, you mentioned this is the last thing. You mentioned Jason Tatum, right? I think that the absolute say elite level outcome here for Flagg is Jason Tatum, but with a mix of Andre Kirilenko. Put in there, and if you get that player, I think what sort of a player that's going to be. That's a top 3 player, top 5 player in the NBA, pretty comfortably, like without really too much of a concern. Let's talk